A colleague of mine recommended reading Dark Emu when we were talking about the Aboriginal culture and them being hunter-gatherers and wanderers and around Australia, and how that had been a misconception. So they recommended me Dark Emu, and so I went and read it. And in reading it, I was quite stunned. What they've done in Dark Emu is they've gone through historical records of all of our pioneers and explorers, and they've extracted sections from their personal diaries and where they've come in contact with Aboriginal people, with fishing techniques, with farming techniques, and with a whole series of community events and villages and community centres. And they've talked about it in their own personal journals. And so Dark Emu goes through so many of our explorers' journals and collates it into the one book. And so they break the book into different sections, like aquaculture is one of the sections, and then agriculture is another section. And then the community areas where they had housing and all those sorts of things is also mentioned in there. When I was reading it, I noticed that most of the references aren't from Western Australia, they're from the Eastern States, which is where where Bruce is from. And so I was intrigued to know, I'm certain that we have the same sort of history over here with our river systems and our Aboriginal people's hunting and collection of so many aquaculture and agricultural areas, that we'd be able to find the same in our explorer references. So in looking at that, I wondered how we might be able to bring it into a middle school setting. And then I investigated a little bit further and found out that there was the Young Dark Emu edition for adolescents. And so in there, they take the key points from Dark Emu's novel and they go target those key points, and then so it makes it more of a student resource. And so one of the things that we'd like to do is we'd like our students to be very aware of the cultural significance of these different ways of farming and agriculture and aquaculture as well. We want to link it into what we do here. We have a sustainable garden, and the middle school we're going to build a sustainable garden further down past the next block. And we want to do something where we're utilising the plants and animals, that more so the plants that we have in this region around the Noongar land, and actually grow them here. And so we're educating our students on what the bush tucker food is and the bush medicine is of this particular region, so of the Noongar people. So we've reached out to some members of our Noongar culture group, and Auntie Teresa and Uncle Trevor. So we've reached out to some of our members of our community in the Noongar community, and we're teeing up them to come in and talk to us about our actual local Whadjuk Noongar history and what plants and were available at that time. We're really blessed. We've got 4 different ecosystems within 10 minutes of our college. So each one of those ecosystems have very unique and specialised plants that have benefits for medicinal purposes as well as for agriculture. So it'll be really interesting when they do come in and they go through those with us. There'll be such a diverse range of plants. So we will unfortunately have lost some of that information. When it's not always written down, we do have somewhat of loss of that. But hopefully when we'll be able to video them and be able to pass it on to our students. And then in the sustainable garden, bring in some of those crops that have got benefits, whether it be mostly for food, whether it be utilising in our cooking rooms, so that some of the bush and native herbs, we're utilising them in our cooking and that sort of thing. There's a whole heap of different ways you could link this into CBL. So CBL, you normally have an overarching question or statement that then students then come up with some guiding statements and how they might act and then engage and investigate into the project. So you could do it a number of different ways. You could look at significant Aboriginal people in the culture, in the Noongar land and the Noongar Whadjuk people, and compare them to our other local Indigenous groups, so like the Pinjar people, and look at the other Southwest Australian groups. You could link it in through that. You could also link it in through the different methods of aquaculture, and so targeting the kids' specific interests. You could make it an overarching statement like, what can we learn from the Noongar culture that assists our agriculture methods today? There's so many different ways that the kids can tap into it. Like with the CBL project, it could be like compare and contrast Western culture versus the local Aboriginal culture of the Whadjuk Noongar people. You could look at, and especially looking at the nutrients in our soil, our current soil. Like we add nutrients to all of our crops that we grow. The Aboriginal people
Never done
didn't.
that.
The plants grew for that particular area, and that's the sustainability of that area. So you could definitely do lots of